Okay, for this video, we're going to talk about the origin of blood cell types and how to identify them. So, blood cell formation, also called hematopoiesis, is the process by which cellular components of blood are replenished as needed. And so, the human body contains about 5 liters of blood. And blood cells are divided into 3 groups, and those would be red blood cells or erythrocytes, white blood cells, leukocytes, and the white blood cells are subdivided into 3 major groups. And then you have the blood platelets, which are the thrombocytes. And the 3 major groups of the white blood cells are the granulocytes, lymphocytes, monocytes. And then over here to the side, you can see a picture of a test tube, and it shows you the 3 layers. And at the bottom, you have red blood cells, and you can see a little tiny sliver of white blood cells and platelets, and then you have the plasma at the top. Where do blood cells originate? The blood cells do not originate in the bloodstream, but they do originate in bone marrow of certain bones, which would be like the long bones. And in adult humans, the bone marrow produces all of the red blood cells, 60 to 70% of the white blood cells, and all of the platelets. And just a little background on the lymphocytes. So lymphatic tissue, like the thymus or the spleen, or even the lymph nodes, produce lymphocytes. And then another fun fact, in the human embryo, the first site of blood formation is the yolk sac, which is eventually absorbed into the gut of the embryo. And later in embryonic life, the liver becomes the most important red blood cell forming organ. But then the bone marrow will soon take over. And then both the red and white blood cells arise through a series of gradual and successive transformations from stem cells. Okay, so the first group are the erythrocytes, or the red blood cells, and these are the most abundant cells in the body. It makes up 40 to 50% of our blood, and the shape of them, how you identify it, is it has a biconcave disc shape, which is round and flat, sort of like a bowl, so the edges are round and then it kind of caves in a little bit. There is not a nucleus in the red blood cells, and they can change shape without breaking, so they can get in and out of vessels and capillaries. They can just change their shape and they don't break. And then the reason it has a red color to it is because there's iron found in hemoglobin, and red blood cells do contain hemoglobin, about 33% of the red blood cells. And then they cannot repair themselves. After they've been broken, they cannot repair themselves. And the lifespan of a red blood cell is about 120 days. And then just some functions of the red blood cells. They transport oxygen from the lungs to the cells of the body, and then they can pick up carbon dioxide from other tissues and unload it in the lungs. Okay, and then the next group is the leukocytes, or the white blood cells, and these account for only 1% of the blood. They are the cells that make up the majority of the immune system, and then they are made in the bone marrow from hematopoietic stem cells. And then there's just some, different types of diseases you could have with white blood cells. They are the leukopenia or leukopenia. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. That's a low white blood cell count, and that can be caused by damage to the bone marrow in the body from things like medication or chemotherapy or even radiation. So if someone has cancer, they more than likely have a low white blood cell count. And then there's leukocytosis, which is a high white blood cell count that can be caused by infections, like inflammatory diseases in the body. And then there are 5 types of white blood cells. There are the neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, lymphocytes, and monocytes. And down here is a picture of the different white blood cells. And you can tell they're almost kind of the same, it's just their makeup is a little different. Back to the 5 different types of white blood cells. The neutrophils are the most common type of white blood cell, and their lifespan is about 6 hours to a few days. And then the eosinophils, the lifespan is 8 to 12 days. Basophil lifespan is a few hours to a few days. And then lymphocytes are small, rounded cells, as you can see right here, and their lifespan is up to years for the memory cells because they help to make the memory cells. And then you have the monocytes, which they're the largest type of white blood cell, and the inside is a kidney shaped. As you can see, it kind of looks like a kidney. That's the nucleus. And then the lifespan is a few hours to a few days. Okay, and then last but not least, you have the platelets, and the nucleus is absent in these as well, and they do not reproduce. And the function of the platelets is that they're part of cells that the body uses for clotting. So if you get a cut, that's automatically what causes clotting is the platelets. So it goes to the site of the infection or the cut, and it stops the bleeding. And it also can dissolve blood clots when they are no longer needed. And so in this picture, we see that they have the white blood cells on here, the red blood cells, and then the platelets. And then on the other side, they have activated platelets, and you can see what those look like as well. Okay, and then for the last slide, I just have all of the blood cells on here, and so it just gives you an idea of what they all look like. And you have the red blood cells here in the middle, and you can see the biconcave disc and how it's rounded on the edges, and then the inside is like shallow, so it's kind of like a bowl, and that's just how I remember it. And then you have the platelets over here, the non-activated platelets, and then you have the activated platelets. And then you have the group of white blood cells and the different formations that they give. And as you can see, this is the one we were talking about earlier with the kidney-shaped nucleus, and then the lymphocytes. And again, these are the ones that produce the memory cells. So when you get sick, it's like the primary response. When you get sick, it takes a few days for your body to get it out of your system, and then the memory cells are produced. And then when you have the secondary response, the body remembers the antigen from the first time, so those memory cells pick up and they get the infection out of the body as fast as they can. So this was the origin of blood cells and how to identify them.